Alright, 5.2 is about dividing polynomials. The lesson is going to pretty much introduce the main portion of the process, and then it's going to go through some actual examples because the process is best learned through practice, not through looking at a bunch of notes and taking a bunch of notes. This is done more by muscle memory, and you will and should actually see some patterns that will help you to recognize that it's not as bad as what it seems, as long as you practice it and as long as you do what you need to do to keep up. When dividing, if you want to know what value to use, you must determine what value makes the lead term of the divisor match the lead term of the dividend. So the number you're dividing by is your divisor, the number you are dividing is your dividend, and so this is what you're trying to make match that. And so when you set this up, and let's go ahead and just set it up as if we're going to divide and not do any more. So the x plus 2 goes on the outside, the 3x squared plus 5x minus 2 goes on the inside, and from there your only job again is to look at the lead terms and say to yourself, what do you have to multiply this by to make it match that? And so therefore, first off, it's easy enough to do whenever the numbers are nice like an x. But again, when you do that, if you remember yesterday we talked about where you start. If there are two terms, you will always start above the second term. So it'll start here, and you notice that you have to multiply by 3, and you also need another x because this has two x's and that has 1. That would be your first term. Again, we are not going to go through the whole thing right now because the whole point of what we're doing is try to make sure we understand what we are doing to actually divide and then kind of take that and put it all together. But again, 3x is going to be your value that you would use in that situation. Let's look at the second one real quick. Again, 2x minus 1 goes on the outside, 8x to the third minus 10x squared plus 2x minus 3 goes on the inside. Once again, we have the lead terms being here and here, and our job is to look and say, what do we need to do to this to make it match that? Again, there are two terms, so you need to start here. First thing you need to do is multiply by 4, and notice this has 1x, that has 3, and so you need 2 of them. And so your first answer or first step would be to put 4x squared there again, because 4x squared times 2x is 8x to the third. Again, very straightforward, very simple. It's just that you have to make sure you practice enough so it's not intimidating to you, because once you get to that point, everything gets a little bit easier. And then the third one, you have 5x squared plus 2x minus 1 going into 25x to the fourth minus 10x to the third plus x squared minus 7x plus 1. And so what we do here is we again look at this and this, but here's the difference between what we saw. This has 1, 2, 3 terms. And because it has 3 terms, you must start above the first, second, third term. So your number would go here. The first thing you would have to do is multiply by 5. The second thing you need, because there are 2 x's and 4 x's, is 2 more x's. Now look carefully at the pattern that you should notice. 5x squared is above x squared. 4x squared is above x squared. And even back to the beginning example, 3x is above 5x. And so it kind of works out as long as you do it the right way, as long as everything goes well. So practice first to make sure you've got it. But as long as everything goes well, you should have x's over x's, constants over constants, etc., because it typically works out that these things will match up, because after 5x squared, you're going to have an x, and then you're going to have some constant. After a 4x squared, you're going to have an x, and then you're going to have some constant. And again, that's how it pretty much works out. So how do we divide? It's pretty much 5 steps, and again, if you need to, look at these steps every time you do it until you finally figure out what's going on, because once you get it, it is very easy. I haven't really done this in a long time, but even in going through it and recognizing these steps, once I started it again, everything kind of made sense. Again, you'll make a few mistakes, but hopefully you again stick with it enough that you just keep kind of coming back until you get it right, and everything else will work out. The first thing you want to do, like we did here, is make the lead terms match. That's why I wanted to go through that. The rest of these steps are pretty easy. I think we know how to multiply. I think we know how to switch terms. I think we know how to simplify, and I think we understand what repeat means, which means for the most part that is your whole process of dividing, because remember, you do the process all the way over and over and over until everything is taken care of, or you have a remainder. So we have 4 examples. Let's look at these 4 examples. I set them up in different ways so you could kind of see what the division looks like. First off, this one here is division. It is that divided by that, so inside out means that 3 minus a, actually I would not put 3 minus a because you want the letter in front. I would put negative a plus 3 going into a squared plus 7a minus 11. So again, going through this whole thing here, it's not again as bad as it seems. The thing is, I needed to make sure we did some things that threw you off. So we have a negative a. Well, how do I make a negative a match a squared? First off, in order to make a positive match a negative, or a negative match a positive, I need to put a negative there. And again, why am I starting above the 7? Because there are two terms, and I need to start above the second term. The second thing is, it doesn't have a number on it, but it does have another a on it. Let me focus this if possible, if you don't mind. Sorry. I don't like the way that looks, and I definitely don't like the way that looks there. We can do it, I believe. There we go. At least better, I hope. But again, negative a, because you need an opposite sign and you need another a. You then multiply or distribute this to both of these. So negative a times a is a squared. Negative a times 3 is negative 3a. You then, just like we did before when we subtracted, this is called switch. So now you switch it around, switch everything there, and you simplify what's left over. This cancels out, and if it doesn't, you did something wrong. 7a and 3a make 10a. And then we understand that we now bring down the 11, and we continue. I guess I kind of left that out of the steps, but you'll hopefully understand that part of it. Then you look and say, how do I make this match that lead term? Again, this is now the number you're looking at, not that. This is now the lead. How do I make negative a match 10a? First off, again, I need it to be negative because it's positive. I do not have a 10 attached at all because of that. And I do have the a, 1a for 1a, which means that that's good. Also notice the pattern. This has an a, this does not. Now I multiply. Negative 10 times a is positive, times negative a is positive 10a. Negative 10 times positive 3 is negative 30. You will then switch all your signs. This goes away, giving us, what, 19? And as we spoke of yesterday, whenever there's a remainder, because there's nothing else to bring down, you add, put a plus, and then take this number over, and I'd put it back in this form just to put it in the right mode, over 3 minus a. And this represents your answer. It is a repetitive process. It is a, I won't say long process, but like I said, as long as you once you get it down, I think it's a process that's easy enough to do. You again just have to make sure you practice it enough to understand. And again, that's what today is about. I'm going to try to get out of here as fast as I can without rushing, and make sure you have enough time throughout the day, today and tomorrow, to practice this stuff. This is also a division, because if you remember, negative 1 means that this whole thing wants to be on the bottom of a fraction. And so this would be what it would look like. It would actually look like this if we were to rewrite it, because again, the negative 1 means that this whole piece wants to be under that part there. And so we will put 3x plus 1 on the outside, and 3x to the fourth minus 5x to the third plus x squared plus 7x. And here's the rule that you have to follow. Once you start with a power of 4, every other power must be there. So 4 must be there, 3, 2, 1, and also the constant must be there. So we have to add a plus 0 here, otherwise it will not work. When we go to work this out, looking at the front term to the front term, it does not need to match a 3, but it does need 3 more x's, and so I have 2 terms. I start above here, and notice the pattern again is right above the x to the third. You now multiply this by both, so you get 3x to the fourth plus x to the third, because that's what 1 times x to the third is. You then switch everything. This cancels out, giving us negative 6x to the third, and then bring down your plus x squared. We now start over. 3x going to negative 6x. First off, the sign is different, so we need a negative. 3 times 2 is 6, and we need 2 more x's because this has 3 and that has 1. But again, you could have just kind of guessed that because it's above the x squared, and it will always match. As long as you start off the right way, it will match all the way down. Then you multiply negative 2, and this is where you got to be careful. Negative 2 times 3 is negative 6x to the third. Negative 2 times 1 is a negative 2 x squared, which you then must switch because you need the front terms to go away. And look how nice this ends up as 3x squared. Now you bring down your plus 7x. And again, how do I make this match this? First off, the 3 is fine, the sign is fine, but it does need an x. And again, look at the pattern. Now you multiply. X times 3x is 3x squared. X times 1 is just x. Switch your signs. This goes away. 7x minus x is 6x plus 0. 3x to 6x is a regular 2 because again 3 times 2 makes 6. You don't need any more x's. This here makes 6x plus 2, which you then switch, and you end up with negative 2. So you add negative 2 over 3x plus 1. Now I'm going to circle this, but I want you to understand that this answer might be in a couple different ways, and I'm not going to worry about writing this, but because there's a negative on top, you can actually take that negative off the top and distribute it back to this sign, ending it as minus 2 over 3x plus 1. So everything else would be in front, then you would just change that into a minus and flip all that around. So again, that is a legitimate shift on that question that you need to keep in mind whenever you're doing this. Next example, this is a straight up division, so y minus 2 on the outside, and here is where the rule comes in. Notice that my highest power is y to the 5th. I hope this ends up well. I didn't really plan this out. But notice that y to the 5th is my highest, but there is no y to the 4th. That means I must put plus 0 y to the 4th. Notice there's no y to the 3rd, so I must put plus 0 y to the 3rd minus 3y squared. There's no regular y, so plus 0y and then minus 20. That is the first step of what you need to do to make sure you are careful in doing everything the right way. I think I just lost my camera.